Уважаемые участники, дамы и господа, для вашего удобства наушники для синхронного перевода можно получить в фойе перед входом в основной зал. Выступление будет проходить на английском языке, приветствие и начало на казахском и русском языках. Dear guests, we have a few minutes before start. Please be sure that all of you have your headphones for translation. Уважаемые гости, позвольте в очередной раз попросить привести ваши мобильные телефоны в беззвучный режим. Dear guests, please one more time, set your cell phones to silent mode. Thank you.
Не будем.
Все есть.
Все нормально, да?
Institutions are a distinctive phenomenon of the modern banking system, and their role in the global economy and influence on society continue to grow constantly. Business solutions that are based not on commercial interests but on the principles of good faith and reasonableness and aimed at the sustainable environmental and social development of regions and improving people's lives have proved effective at different levels. The Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific consists of 90 organizations from 40 countries. In over 50 years of active and successful operations, the association has become the world's largest alliance of national and regional development institutions. The projects financed by ADFIAP organizations actively influence the continuous development of huge territories that account for as much as 35% of the surface of our planet and are home to some 2 billion people. The active investment approach of ADFIAP members is crucial for communications between governments and the private sector and is successful in developing the financial, human and intellectual capital of our countries. The joint work carried out under the auspices of the association not only helps to increase the influence on the global financial architecture, but is also crucial for developing national and cross-border infrastructure, green innovation and inclusive growth projects, raising energy efficiency, supporting small and medium-sized businesses, agriculture, ensuring sustainable economic growth and higher living standards. We believe that continuous development and innovations are the most important instruments for global improvement and that our partnership helps unite the world around projects that are truly important. Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific. We make this world better together.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our participants, dear friends, and honorable guests. A warm welcome to the 46th ADFIAP annual meetings with the theme Sustainable Infrastructure, Operating Models and Methods. We are delighted to have you all here today as leaders and experts in the fields of finance, development, and infrastructure to change ideas, share experiences, and discuss the latest trends and challenges in sustainable infrastructure development in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage the President and Chief Executive Officer, Africa Finance Corporation, Mr. Samaila Zubairu. Please join me in welcome Director General for Private Sector Operations and Asian Development Bank, ADB, Suzanne Gabouri. Vice President and Chief Risk Officer, New Development Bank, Anil Kishora. Fon Plata Vice President, Mariana Prada Noya. Chairman of the Management Board, Eurasian Development Bank, Nikolai Podguzov. Dear guests, please welcome the moderator of the first session, Ben Aris. To officially open the conference, we would like to call on stage the ADFIAP Vice Chairman, Chief Executive Officer of IPDC Finance of Bangladesh, Mr. Maminul Islam.
His Excellency Mr. Eurasian Jamuabayev, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Kazakhstan, His Excellency Erbulat Dosaev, Mayor of Almaty City, Mr. Nikolai Podguzov, Chairman of the Management Board, Eurasian Development Bank, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 46th ADFIAP annual meetings hosted by Eurasian Development Bank in the beautiful city of Almaty, Kazakhstan. This year's theme, DFIs and Sustainable Infrastructure, is particularly relevant and timely as we continue to face the challenges of climate change and economic development. The Association of Development Financing Institutions in Asia and the Pacific, or ADFIAP, is the largest and most prestigious aggregation of development banks and other financial institutions engaged in the financing of sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. Established on October 1, 1976, under the auspices of Asian Development Bank, the latter remains a special member of the association and counts among its 91 member institutions in 40 countries and territories. ADFIAP is a founding member of the World Federation of Development Financing Institutions, comprising similar associations in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. It is a non-governmental organization in consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Development financing institutions play a crucial role in promoting sustainable growth and development and their work in financing infrastructure projects is particularly important. As we strive to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, DFIs have a vital role to play in ensuring that infrastructure is built in a sustainable and environmentally responsible way. I am also delighted to welcome the distinguished moderators and speakers who will be sharing with us their insights and perspectives. This will undoubtedly enrich the discussions and contribute to our understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing the DFIs in promoting sustainable infrastructure. On behalf of the ADFIAP Board of Directors, the ADFIAP Secretariat, and our wonderful host, the Eurasian Development Bank, I would like to express my gratitude to all the distinguished guests for joining us here today. I hope that you find this conference informative, engaging, and productive, and that you leave with new ideas and inspiration for advancing our shared mission of sustainable development. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you and wish you a productive and engaging conference. Thank you.
A round of applause, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Mr. Islam. Dear guests, please welcome on stage the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Mr. Yerulan Zhamaubayev.
Good morning, құрметті ханымдар мен мырзалар. Азия тынық мұхит аймағын дамыту қаржы институттар қауымдастығының 46-шы жылдық жиналысына қош келдіңіз.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our 46th annual meeting. The President of the country, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, pays special attention to foreign investments. In connection with opening with such a large conference, the President has sent a special congratulation and expresses his wishes to this conference. More than 300 guests from 40 states participate in this conference. I am happy to greet you on behalf of the government. As you know, Kazakhstan has a multi-vector policy with maintain friendly relations with all countries. In the Republic of Kazakhstan, more than 40,000 companies with foreign capital are working. This factor is growing every year. Kazakhstan takes the higher rates in the credit ratings, notwithstanding with the global rate risks. The GDP made up 4.9% in the first half of the year. Our goal is 5%. Our capital is provided by the national reserves. One of our goals is maximum increase in the investment attractiveness and to make more than 50 agreements on protection and defense with other countries. More than 54 countries have a visa-free mode of traveling, including Indonesia and others. The legislation provides for investment support for 25 years. Kazakhstan preserves leadership in Central Asia on foreign investments. According to results of 2022, direct investments were attracted to Kazakhstan to the amount of $28 billion. This is a record amount for the last 10 years. In the country, there are big opportunities for all spheres of industry, dear friends. The government is always, the state is always ready to work with investors. This event will make its contribution into development and investment investment-related activities. Wish you every success and have a nice time in the hospitable city of Almaty. Thank you very much.
Stage. Mr. Yerbolat Dosayev, the mayor of Almaty city.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to welcome you to beautiful Almaty city. This is an honor to host the 46th annual meeting of Association of Development Financial Institutions of Asia and the Pacific region, which is taking place for the first time in Central Asia. Today, more than 150 executives of international development institutions from the more 30 countries are presenting here. I'm grateful to the especially Eurasian Development Bank for this invitation and opportunity to participate in the opening ceremony. Kazakhstan is one of the founders of ADB since 2006. Today, with the co-financing of ADB, we are implementing a large-scale infrastructure projects in Almaty, such as the modernization of CHP2 by transfer to gas, Almaty International Airport expansion, and the big Almaty Ring Road backup project. Total investments of these projects amounts of the $2.2 billion. Almaty is a cultural, scientific, business and financial center of Kazakhstan. The city forms a fifth of the country's GDP and more than a quarter of all the budget incomes of the Kazakhstan. Forming about the 60%, SMEs are the main driver of the city's economy. 90% of our major bank headquarters and the more 110 international organizations and companies are located here. Our main mission is to make Almaty a comfortable and safe city, attracting talents, technologies, and investments from all over the world. One of the key priorities in the implementation to create the Green Almaty, and we are very welcome for all the green projects and initiatives, such as modernization of the transport system, energy-efficient housing, grid modernization for utilities, and others. We look forward to the future cooperation and implementation of such projects. Dear guests, today's meeting marks an important step in strengthening cooperation between development financial institutions of Asia-Pacific region. I sincerely wish you to have a fruitful and productive time for the upcoming days. I hope you will enjoy your stay in our beautiful city of Almaty. Thank you very much.
We appreciate Mr. Dosayev for his welcoming speech. Thank you so much. Dear guests, please join me in welcoming the chairman of the management board of Eurasian Development Bank, Mr. Nikolai Podguzov.
Esteemed Minister, Mayor, dear Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear guests, thank you very much for coming to beautiful Almaty. The Eurasian Development Bank is proud to host this ADFIAP annual meeting, and I'm personally very honored to see you all here. This event is a great opportunity. This is an opportunity to combine the efforts of national and international institutions, exchange experience in implementing projects, establish new contacts, and expand cooperation in sustainable financing. I believe that our meeting could bring a lot of value to Central Asia, states in particular. For this purpose, EDB is a host of annual meeting, organize several additional events today and tomorrow that center on the needs of Central Asia. Hopefully, it will become a significant milestone towards substantial improvement of the infrastructure. I believe that DFIs and multilateral development banks in particular are instrumental in reaching progress on connectivity, water, and energy. This day promised to be a wonderful experience. Newcomers to Kazakhstan are in for some great new impressions. Those of you who already fell in love with Central Asia would be delighted to be back. I welcome all ADFIAP members and guests from throughout Asia and Pacific, and of course from our host country, the Republic of Kazakhstan. Thank you for your attention. I wish you all a tremendously successful 46th ADFIAP annual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Podguzov. We shall now proceed to the special interest session. This session enables attendees to share a common interest and offers excellent opportunities for dialogue and deliberation on a specific topic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator for the first session, Mr. Ben Aris, founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we proceed, I understand that the Minister, Mr. Jamubayev, and the Mayor, Dusayev, have to leave us. So I'd like all of us to thank them for their comments and hard work towards the success of attracting investment into Kazakhstan. A round of applause, I think. So welcome to the plenary session, the role of DFIs and IFIs in the implementation of cross-border and national projects, investment projects here in Kazakhstan. We're here today representing a family of multinational and international development banks. The goal of this session is to swap ideas. We have representatives on our panel from various IFIs, DFIs, who have experience in similar work in different places. And we're trying to do this more as a sort of workshop, if you like, where we can cross-fertilize ideas relevant to the work of the EDB here in Kazakhstan in order to promote investment. A few words to introduce myself. Ben Aris, I'm a journalist. I started my career here actually in Central Asia in 1994 when I was the regional correspondent to the Economist Intelligence Unit based in Tashkent. Also spent some time in Bishkek and came here regularly to Almaty. I've seen it from the very beginning in so much as when we were in Tashkent, there was nothing in '94. We had to fly to Moscow in order to buy toothpaste. And the problem was there was no kerosene in Uzbekistan. So we had to drive across the steppe here to Almaty in order to get planes out, in order to do those sort of things. And in those days, there was actually bizarrely a very good French restaurant in the Dostuk, and pretty much nothing else. My point is that I've watched it develop and now it's flourishing. I mean, these are modern cities, fast-growing economies, standard of living has gone up, incomes have gone up, the level of FDI that's gone in is enormous and seen across the board, starting with oil and gas, but through to retail, agriculture, and so on. And now I think the region has reached a new phase, a critical mass, where it's going to go up to the next level, and the work of the development banks is going to be key. So with those comments, I'd like to move on to the session. Our panelists are going to give a series of speeches and presentations. Within those, they hopefully will address the challenges that are faced in attracting and carrying out infrastructure and investment projects. The goal of these talks is to highlight areas for cooperation, both at national and international level, as much as pragmatically as possible. I ask panelists to please try and stick to 10 minutes for their speeches and presentations. There's a clock. And with that, I'd like to call the first speaker to talk, Mr. Samila Zubairu. If you would take the floor, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'm just going to address a couple of issues that I think have been raised for my attention. I'd like to start by thanking our host, the chairman of EDB, for convening this session and providing us this opportunity to share experience. As you know, multilateral financial institutions were typically set up to address challenges. If we look at the very first one, it was set up to address post-war crisis. I believe the EDB itself, the Eurasian Development Bank, was also set up to address challenges. Likewise, the Africa Finance Corporation, when we were established. And because of the nature of the challenges that we're supposed to address, we have to find a way of going beyond individual countries and look at regional challenges. Because most countries would face their own issues and not look at the regional infrastructure or the regional industrialization or the regional value chains that need to be developed to enhance the prosperity and well-being of all the various countries. So as multilaterals, we have to really try to embrace and accept the challenges and opportunities that we face and try to ensure that we can get our leaders to upgrade their ambition about how to build the regional infrastructure that will be required for prosperity of all. At the Africa Finance Corporation, we have approached our challenge, which is to try to provide solutions for Africa's infrastructure deficit and challenging operating environment by developing and financing infrastructure, natural resource, and industrial assets that will enhance productivity and economic growth of African states. And we do that mainly by focusing on how we can increase the pipeline of bankable projects. That is what we call our de-risking to develop approach. So we all know that anytime you have a bankable project, everybody, mostly the DFIs, are happy to line up to finance it. The big challenge has always been the pipeline of this bankable project. So what we've done in Africa is focus on how can we work with governments, how can we work with sponsors, how can we create the necessary framework for public-private partnerships that allows us to de-risk projects in a way that we can create a pool of bankable projects. And we have done that across the board. So for example, before we were established, there were several projects that were in the drawing board, and never went anywhere. In fact, we know that without our existence, most projects will not happen in Africa today. So I feel the same way for EDB and other development finance institutions. The presence and their participation is very, very important. So the first wind farm in Cape Verde was developed by the Africa Finance Corporation. And since then, we've developed the first independent power project in Ghana. We've also developed the first wind farm in Djibouti. And we're also developing the first private sector-led hydropower plant in Cote d'Ivoire. So these projects are across very different countries. We also are looking at regional infrastructure. So we're building the road between Lagos and Abidjan. That is going across 5 countries. But the way it's being structured is each institution takes one bit of the road. We're also working now, providing advice to governments in Angola and several African countries on building a rail corridor between Lobito and Dar es Salaam that will traverse several countries as well. Now, all of these are important because what we believe is that Africa needs to move away from exporting raw materials to value-added projects. So we are focused on the structural transformation of our continent. And that is more so now as we all aspire towards net zero, whereby we're all looking at how we can transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and also to really work towards reducing carbon emissions. So the current supply chain architecture of the world today, where most of the resources are in Africa that we know we need for the energy transition, and is being taken to one part of the world for processing and then shipped to the rest of the world, it's not going to work because we will never achieve global net zero if we don't reduce shipping. And shipping is one of the largest emitters. In fact, shipping is the 6th largest emitter after several other countries that I don't want to mention here, but shipping is the 6th largest emitter. And the way for us to achieve net zero is to find a way of reducing that. So, and the way to do that is really to look at processing minerals and metals at the source of location and also areas of need. So we're creating the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is going to be the largest, one of the largest common markets. And for that, we're looking at a potential of over $3 trillion in trade. Now, for that to happen, we would need regional infrastructure to connect the continent. We also need to produce goods and services that are made on the continent. And we are very focused on that, and we've built a company called Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms that is focused on transforming raw materials to finished goods. And we started really with a partnership with one of the governments, the Gabon Special Economic Zone, whereby the government wanted to transition away from hydrocarbons to other goods for the economy. And we focused on timber and mining. So that initiative led us to develop 3 ports, general cargo port, a container port, and a mineral port. We've also had to invest in infrastructure, transmission lines. We've built an industrial park, and we've invested in coaches and wagons to bring goods from the hinterland, to the industrial processing zone. In the industrial processing zone, we've created a one-stop shop for all the permits, and approvals required to operate. Now, that has been successful. It has increased earnings by 6 times. It has created over 30,000 jobs. It has provided opportunity for several companies to site in the location. The success of that has been replicated in several other countries across different value chains. So we are looking at value chains for cotton now. We're looking at value chains for cashew and cocoa as well. The point I'm making here is that once you do something that is successful, you find that it can be replicated in several other parts. And the success of it is typically one that requires integration of several other countries, not just one region. So one of the other initiatives we're working now is on livestock in Chad, and it's supposed to provide food security for both Central African countries as well as export to the Gulf countries and potentially Asia. In the Benin Special Economic Zone, we actually have opportunity to sell T-shirts and towels to the US. In fact, furniture made from the Special Economic Zone in Incock, which I will say is the first certified carbon neutral economic zone in Africa, is sold in the US as well. And if we look forward, to the electric mobility, we know that electric vehicles now has a market of about $7 trillion between now and 2030. That is going to grow significantly to over $46 trillion by 2050. So for us to be able to transition, from the current forms of energy to more renewable energy and to all achieve net zero, a lot of mining has to happen. And as development finance institutions, it is our responsibility to ensure that that mining is done responsibly, and the associated infrastructure that's required is also built responsibly. So our view is that if we focus on value addition of, let's say, nickel, cobalt, copper, graphite, into battery precursors, which is the 3rd stage in electric vehicles, would create significant value on the continent. And I think that several other development finance institutions can look at such challenges, look at what are the opportunities of tomorrow, what can we do today to ensure that we are building the right infrastructure, we're building the right industries, we have the right partnership between the government and private sector, and we're providing the right kind of support that's required for economies to grow, for jobs to be created. Bearing in mind that we have a vast growing population, and we need to find a way of engaging them, providing them something to look forward to for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can pick up on that, I mean, you said at the beginning the obviously priority for governments is the national interests and the interregional ones. You play a key role in doing that. What in concrete terms can you do in order to promote that policies? And also, what is the interplay between the private sector and government? Do you use things like PPP in order to produce those projects? Is it led by private sector or led by you or led by the government?
So typically it will be a combination of all the things that you mentioned. What we try to do is we have what we call the Africa Investment Forum, which is also an association of the DFIs in Africa. At the leadership level, we have a program whereby we sit down and discuss common issues. and then we use that to engage with African leaders. And because of the nature of our charter and the fact that we need to have immunities and privileges from various African states, and we have African states as members, we have opportunity to discuss with the presidents, the prime ministers, the ministers, the central banks, and a vast, network. So we make them understand that, okay, look, this is a challenge for you, this is a challenge for the other country. The best way for us to deal with it is for us to build common infrastructure for all the parties. And typically, we will need to have a public-private partnership for that to happen. It is very important that we have what we call local content policies. So we need to intentionally support local entrepreneurs within the economy, and ensure that they are part of participants in the value chain. Development really has to be around outcomes. So it can't be that the local economy doesn't get the benefit of the resources that are available near them. So you need to make intentional decisions for that. So for example, in Senegal, we're supporting one of the first independent power projects that will utilize natural gas from Senegal. And we're supporting a group of local sponsors for that. We're supporting a port in Tagoradi, also backing local sponsors that are supposed to link Ghana to Burkina Faso, to Mali, and to, the hinterland. So again, all of this you do by a dialogue with the government, having a financing program whereby you can support the local entrepreneurs. It's going to be difficult, and it takes time, but you must start from somewhere, and then you work with them, give them the advice, guide them, hold their hands, and see them through the journey.
And deliver positive results, keep people encouraged. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Susanna Gabor, who is the Director General of the Private Sector Operations at ADB. Please, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, and colleagues and guests. From ADB's perspective, we're very much a pleasure to be here, and I think, Ben, some of your comments, my first trips here were from 1993.
Right.
So having seen vast changes since then, across the board on everything, every sector has been touched.
I think vast is an understatement.
It's really quite remarkable, and at that time I'd spent a lot of time in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, many of the other Central Asian economies, and so you can see all the differences that are being made, and you can see the work that the government is doing. So for ADB, for us, when we're looking at sustainable infrastructure, obviously now with some of the comments that have been made about climate, we also have climate ambitions on this, and so sustainable infrastructure is at the heart of that. So founded in 1966, and since then we've been scaling up operations quite dramatically. And just to put a number on that, so between 2001 and 2022, both from a public and a private sector side, so I wear my private sector hat, and I have my other public sector colleagues that we work with, we've financed approximately almost $17 billion in countries which are covered in the CARIC region. And you can see that the impact of transport and logistics, so 71% of that is on transport. Energy is 22%, and trade accounts for about 3%, so very much a smaller portion. So, but interconnectivity, and I think that having the foundations of the right ability, the enabling environment. I think when you're actually looking at these kinds of investments or opportunities, you really need to have the policy working downstream with the enabling environment to ensure that there are the investment opportunities there. So from an ADB perspective, we've actually been working on that. We have a new operating model that we're looking at, because we have both public and private under one house. Then you can have those discussions upstream then with the government. I completely agree. It's all at those all different levels of engagement that you do have, but it's for those goods that that need to be developed, and absolutely logistics and trade is part of that. And then how do you do that? As part of the questions is that yes, PPPs and stuff is one aspect of that, but you need, willing partners, you need frameworks that people understand what the rules of the game are so that they know what they can invest and how they can invest. And just from a PPP perspective, so we've been, advising in Uzbekistan, we'd helped put in a PPP structure there. And within the last couple of months, we've financed 5 renewable energy transactions from wind and solar. So that just kind of gives you, if you have that platform, that springboard was what I would say, is that then you can actually make those investments. It makes a huge, huge difference. And so, again, looking at trade, the other side of that of trade is the fact that I think there's many, many linkages within industries. I think that one of the key things that we're also looking at is not only infrastructure, it's capital market development, because in order to have local financial institutions, local banks, one of our mandates is to mobilize capital into the countries, but also to help develop the capital markets so you can help finance the projects locally. Local currency is something that's very much needed with all of this. So we can provide about 22 local currencies in all our countries of operation. But again, developing a local capital markets is really where you need to have the funding develop that to create that springboard for economic growth. Agribusiness, as we've mentioned, there's logistics aspects within agribusiness. We're seeing, dry land ports. You're seeing, container cargo centers, regional. I had the pleasure on Saturday while I was here going to see a local regional container port, container logistics facility, and some of the things that they were telling me was the fact that is increasing in this part of the world, has been increasing dramatically, and there is a huge need. And again, you need to have the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure and stuff in place to encourage that investment. And you need that in the financial sector. You need it in the various sectors in which you're working. So I think, and also to do that, it requires partnerships. And it's not just one institution. It's all the different financial institutions that are here, but also partners with the government, partners with the clients themselves. Obviously, in order to make this all happen, because we can't do it ourselves. So many of the clients or the banks that are here, from the DFI and from the international space that we work with. And I think that there's many other aspects within sustainable infrastructure that you can work in. And it's not necessarily the usual kind of things. Many of the types of, if you're looking at from an energy efficiency point of view, if you're looking for climate change, for getting to net zero, energy efficiency is actually one of the unsung heroes, I think, in all of this, because we don't necessarily pay enough attention to that, and it has a huge impact on what you're doing. So when you're looking at things, when you're looking at the energy intensity of what's going on, particularly as you try to plan out pathways to low carbon transition pathways, then you can actually have a very clear impact. Some of the other things that we're doing is also to look at looking at low energy or these zero transition pathways, looking at opportunities in greening industries. I think some of the comments that have been made with regards to the mining sector, obviously within Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, etc. Mining forms a very huge part of what they're doing and part of the economy. So how do we bring in and help bring in best practice, looking at ways of greening the industries, and particularly as we're financing a lot of EV vehicles around, globally in Asia Pacific where we are. You need to look at those supply chains and really kind of map out those supply chains and figure out where does that end, because it's not just that that bus that you're riding in or that car that you're driving, the minerals, the critical minerals for that, of which there is a wealth of in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, again in Central Asia, and elsewhere. We need to look at those industries to figure out how they can develop in a way that can actually help the supply chain. Agribusiness is exactly the same thing, is that you're looking at the supply chains And it's critical with this to have local content, local involvement, because you need to develop the skills and the abilities there. And cross-border stuff, you've mentioned, again, some of the regional stuff, regional investments. We've recently made $1 billion investment in a cross-border facility where we took hydro out of Laos and we invested and worked with clients and the power was sold over to Vietnam. So you have, again, a very complicated structure. We brought in many different types of financial partners. You also need to bring in other financial instruments such as blended finance because in part of the wind so it's part hydro, part wind, and then with that you need to figure out, the very technical aspects in the PPAs such as flickering and where you don't have, how do you manage these risks in order to create a bankable deal? Well, we have tools which you bring in through subsidized, or I should say, concessional monies, and then so you can actually mitigate those risks, because you need to encourage the private sector to invest. I do think in the future we do need those partnerships. We need the public partnerships in order to work with the downstream, with the private sector clients, because it requires all of that. We know that most of the jobs are created in the private sector. Most of the financing in these parts will be created in the private sector. But again, it needs to be able to direct it in the most optimal way. So many things. I've thrown lots of ideas out there across everything, but with that, I would just say thank you. And it's a really interesting topic, and I think that one that's critically important for the region.
Indeed. Thank you for that. So you covered a lot of ground, and ADB in particular is known for its technical assistance and loans. I was particularly interested in the transport because transport is an economic multiplier, and again, watching this region for a long time, it seems to me it's reached to a point transport is becoming increasingly important in so much as the inter-transport within the region, and the trade and flow and investment that we're seeing now is not new, but certainly has picked up pace. And on top of that, we've got the transport flow from Asia through this region up to Europe, which is also playing a factor. Within that, you have this CAREC program, which has been very successful, promoting socio-economic development and increasing connectivity, which is, I think, a key theme, which is what you were talking about. In concrete terms, though, how do you look at the sectors here to promote those goals? And specifically, you have a vast area. You mentioned extremely complicated investment in Vietnam. I mean, how does that cooperation with the other IFIs, development banks within this region, how do you see that playing out?
Thanks. Yeah, so within the CAREC, organization, for us, the basic areas are all, our priority sectors are really, once again, are transport, trade facilitation, trade policy, and energy. We also get involved within that across the different sectors of renewable energy, financial institutions, agribusiness, healthcare as well. So, and we've been able to make significant contributions. Some of the projects that I've named that we were doing, for example, in Uzbekistan required, many of the multilaterals and financial partners that are here. So we have a mandate to mobilize local capital, both local if we can, as well as international, and that's through financial intermediation. So we bring people to the table. I have a syndication and mobilization team. That is their sole focus, is to try and bring in financial partners as much as possible. And then what you're trying to do is as you all know, you take a portfolio approach and figure out, how you can make those investments, what kind, what risk profiles, and everything else, so you can actually construct a sustainable portfolio. But for, from a CAREC perspective, we serve as, ADB serves as the CAREC Secretariat. And so we take on, helping to organize events, ministerial conferences, and that kind of stuff. And so some of the partners that are here, so, the CAREC development partners include EBRD, AIB, Islamic Development Bank, IMF, UNDP, and World Bank /IFC. So I think that, in a broader scope, in a broader sense, CAREC provides a new space for development partners to engage in the region, and a fora in which, you can discuss the issues. And, many of the things that we've been talking about is economic and financial stability. We're still in a post-COVID phase, and in particular on logistics, particularly in how, things are working from an economic point of view. And this is where I think these economic and regional linkages are really, really important, because you still are seeing the whole shakeout from the pandemic and then other, impacts that have happened in the region. So, these are really, really important aspects, and I think that development partners, both existing and new, can assume lead roles in various areas, sectors, subsectors, and, based on the comparative advantages, incubate new ideas and projects. You have typically a higher risk appetite that, as a development bank, you have a slightly different, risk appetite where you can actually invest in projects. And I like the idea of creating, opportunities for projects, because more often than not, sometimes there's not a lack of capital, but there's a lack of bankable deals. So if you have partners come together to help, provide solutions, maybe some advice, and packaging this all together, then you can actually make critical investments in this region.
Out of curiosity, I mean, where does the funding come from? I mean, the development banks play an important role here, lead role, but I mean, are you seeing the advent of things like institutional investors, pension funds, long-term, private equity funds? I mean,
Absolutely.
These people are arriving now.
They are. It's really interesting because over the years, what you've seen, I would say in the last 10, 15 years, you've seen a huge evolution of types of investors. I was also a fund manager in a previous life, and to try and invest, raise money from pension funds was a real challenge, particularly when it was a fund that actually was looking to invest in emerging markets. And that was a bit of a strange animal for them. Now, you see the regulators are saying that, you need to be aware of what you're investing in. There's a big push for impact. There's a big push for E&S. There's a big push for looking at climate risk. So I think that the way that the world has been structured, the rating agencies, the regulators, it is a very different environment now than it used to be. So yes, you see many pension funds, I'm Canadian, so I see many of the Canadian pension funds have global ambitions. They have net zero ambitions. So they're setting up concessional monies, concessional flows. We've actually raised concessional monies from the likes of Bloomberg, from Goldman Sachs. So, there are different sources of capital that are there. They're coming together, and they realize that they need to have a plan, and I think that to address climate change, to come up with, investment with impact. And I think the thesis of that, you can invest for impact and environment with a good return, that has been proven. So in the years, before, you didn't necessarily have that data there to support that. I think the data is starting to show, and has been showing, that is actually a viable investment approach and a viable investment strategy. So yes, you are seeing these kind of partners there.
So like I say, I think we're coming to a new phase. I mean, after 30 years of transition and the chaos of the first 10 years, that Central Asia is coming into its own and is about to go to another level, which is what all the development banks here are working hard to do. Suzanne, thank you very much for your comments. Moving on, we're going to talk now Anil Kishora, who's the VP and Risk Officer at New Development Bank, aka the BRICS Bank, an institution I'm particularly interested in. I went to one of the first sessions when it was set up. Over to you. You have a presentation, do you not? And you have the clicker.
Thank you. So, are we going to have the presentation here, or
I
do you
think
want
so,
me
yes.
to make? It will be useful if we can have it on the screen.
Yes.
But meanwhile, let me make some opening remarks and.
Sorry, do we need a clicker for the presentation? Oh, it's here. Right. Yes.
So good morning, and thank you especially to the Eurasian Development Bank and the city of Almaty for having us here today. You know, ADFIAP, this is the 46th annual meeting. That's really half a century. So it's a well-established platform. Compared to that, the New Development Bank is really new. We were set up only in 2015. We have started operations in 2016. Of course, we have come a long way. So please allow me to make a quick introduction about the New Development Bank as well, and then I'll cover the topic that we are supposed to cover today. So as I said, 2015, and now membership has expanded to non-BRICS countries, Bangladesh, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and a few more are on the way. And as you know, the membership is highly concentrated. We just have 8 members. But in terms of population, it's close to 3 billion people. So what NDP does is going to have a huge impact across almost 42-43% of the planet's population. And we have approved about $33 billion for 1996 projects. This is the number as of 31st December. And high impact SDG aligned operations, disaster resilient, technology integrated, socially inclusive. So it's a very integrated approach that we take. And our major focus areas, clean energy, transport, water and sanitation, environmental protection, social digital infrastructure. I believe all these sectors are equally important for Central Asia. This is the map of our general strategy for 2022-2026, which we are right now implementing. So the major focus is on mobilizing resources. It was spoken by one of the co-panelists here about local currency. That is a major area for us, and we are really working on to develop that market. Institution building and financing for impact, because over the years, even though development banks, multilateral development banks continue to be very important, our share has been coming down in terms of total financing required or the total financing that we make available. So we have to be conscious that whatever we lend leads to impact. And we intend providing $30 billion in total volume and 30% of total financing in local currency over this period. Climate finance, of course, is 40%, and in order to work with other multilateral development and other DFIs, we want to co-finance, which could include parallel financing as well. 20% of projects in terms of numbers, so that we are there in more and more projects. 30% of total financing to non-sovereign operations. And that is intended because many of our member countries and across the board EMDCs in general are facing constraints in terms of budget, etc. So it's important that we reach out to non-sovereign parties as well. And direct 40% of total approvals to climate change mitigation, and including energy transition, which of course will include areas like energy efficiency, grid upgradation, etc. It was really nice. She called this about unsung hero, because a lot of savings can be done there if we get it right. And again, this is in terms of governance, accountability, IT, communication, risk management. This is what we are doing in terms of positioning the bank, New Development Bank, in a way that it is able to cater to the requirements of member countries much more effectively. And this is something which could be of importance to Central Asia and especially geographies like this, supporting regional connectivity and integration. Some time back, we did a project in Lesotho. It's in the water sector, which connects Lesotho and South Africa, and which is mutually very beneficial. And as our membership expands, like India, Bangladesh, China, Russia, India, so and on in Latin America as well. There will be more and more scope for regional connectivity and integration, promote economic cooperation across EMDCs, and such projects hold great potential to strengthen the relationship among NDB member countries, contribute to knowledge exchange and experience sharing, which we believe is very important, and bolster NDB's role as a platform for wider collaboration among EMDCs. So although it is promoted by BRICS countries, it is a platform, it's a bank for emerging markets and developing countries, and that's why we have new members coming in. Risk governance, risk is independent here, and it is represented at the vice president level. And the reason is that New Development Bank is equally owned by the shareholders, the main principal founding members, the five members. So keeping that in view, and there is another reason that we do not have too many non-borrowing members. So how do we ensure that governance is taken care of and right decisions are taken? So risk is completely independent in this bank. And of course, we have the framework in case any of you is interested, we can talk about it. So I would like to thank you here and just make a few remarks. You know, this bank was set up with a very clear mandate. The mandate was to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development. So over the first 5 years, we blended the sustainable part with infrastructure, and we said we are financing sustainable infrastructure. So once this sustainability angle was brought in, climate plus SDG goals. So we filtered for both the criteria, and that's how we could build up this portfolio of about $30 billion. The majority of this funding has gone to transport, which I personally feel is really important for strengthening connectivity, be it within the member countries or across the border. So transport is one of our major sectors. Water, again, more and more I realize that water also will require a regional approach, as I mentioned about Lesotho and South Africa. So water, energy. Now even Central Asia, in fact I was reading somewhere a lot of a scope for renewable energy in this part of the world as well, which could be exported to other countries. So all this connectivity, the regional connectivity, has different components, different elements, which I find gel with the strategic objectives of New Development Bank. Energy, water, energy efficiency, transport are major areas where we focus on. Finally, given the convening power that MDBs and development banks in general have, and this convening power is an enormous kind of accelerator for our activities. So our members, as you know, are the founding members, China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, across different continents. We sit together, and I would say almost all the decisions are taken by consensus. And it's really, as the Chief Risk Officer, it's heartening for me to see that always it is the bank's interest, it is the broader interest of the membership which prevails in all these discussions. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share these thoughts about NDB, and I'm here to take the discussion forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anil. NDB is a very interesting development bank, and you have a focus on both sovereign and non-sovereign loans. But within your brief member countries, there's huge disparities, from Bangladesh to Brazil. I was wondering how you focus on each of those, the sources of capital and the different levels of development that each of the countries in, and maybe it's appropriate to describe you as a IMF of the leading emerging markets plus Global South? Would that be unfair?
Thank you for that question. I would just like to highlight two elements. The first part is that NDB is a demand-driven, country system-based organization. So we do not make any policy prescription, and we go by the demand that we get from member countries. The reason is, like our other peer MDBs which were set up long time back, at that stage member countries required a lot of support, but now many of our member countries and the members in particular that we have, they have their own well thought out system for developing their policies. They know their countries the best, so we go by that. So this is the first element. That is the starting point. Now what additionality we bring? One is that we lend really long term. So post-COVID, we supported our member countries with big ticket size loans for 30 years, which is a pretty long term. And the interest rates, of course, because we are not a profit-making kind of commercial organization, so interest rates are very, very competitive. So these are the two elements, concrete, because I heard you mentioned a couple of times about concrete. So this is something really concrete which helps. And in terms of non-sovereign, obviously it is not 30 years, 20 years, but compared to the market, it is longer term. And there are, like in South Africa, for example, let's say energy sector, telecom digital sector, which is great for connectivity. So we have been lending there, which is almost 30-40% longer tenor than what you get in the market. And the ticket size is also better compared to the market. So that's how we are able to influence development in the sectors that matter for the countries.
All eyes are on South Africa, the BRICS summit's coming up. I'm sure you'll be happy to share with us the names of the new candidates who are going to join the organization. But seriously, one of the possibilities is Kazakhstan joining amongst many others. I mean, the BRIC organization, the BRIC Bank, and you're looking to expand your membership within Global South, leading emerging markets. At least you can tell us something about that, maybe?
Absolutely. It is by design, and it's very much there in our constitution, which is our Articles of Agreement. The Articles of Agreement itself provide that the founding members will keep 55% of the shareholding, and the rest, 45%, has to go to others. And the priority here is emerging markets and developing countries, because that was by design. This is an institution which is being set up by emerging markets, will be run by emerging markets. So keeping that vision in mind, membership is open, and we are in discussion with a number of countries. Of course, we had this COVID crisis and pandemic, etc., which made travel very difficult. But now I think things are back to normal.
Yes.
So we are on track there.
And the issue, to probe a little bit further with the new members, there's still a debate going on, which is going to be a topic at the summit of how people qualify to be members, you know, whether there is like an accession process they have to go through, benchmarks they have to meet. But this still remains a matter of discussion at the moment, is that right?
So in terms of accession, it's very kind of non-apolitical and very technical. So what we do is that if it can be initiated by the management of the bank, it can be initiated by any of our members, or any country can on its own reach out to us. And I have found, incidentally, that's handled by my vice presidency. So I have found that all these three modes work. So we have received requests independently. Then we, of course, we analyze it, take it to our board, and get their mandate, and then we engage in formal discussions. And as far as the announcements are concerned, occasionally we have made these announcements, especially in light of this pandemic that was ongoing. So as and when a member like Bangladesh, I know our Honorable Prime Minister of India invited the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh to be a member, so the process was very quick. And in some cases, when it starts bottom up, it can take a little bit more time. So it's very flexible approach, I would say.
Interesting times, though. Clearly, it's on the move. Thank you very much for your comments. Moving to the next speaker, Mariana Prado-Noya. She's the Vice President of Fon Plata from South America. If you have a speech, don't you?
Yes, I have.
Please.
Something very short. Thank
Okay.
you. Well, good morning. I'm honored to be here today sharing this session with authorities from important development banks across Asia and Africa. If I'm not mistaken, I'm the only representative of a Latin American development bank at the ADFIAP's annual meeting, despite the fact that we share a member country with NDB, that's Brazil. And well, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to briefly present what is Fon Plata and what has been our role fostering the integration of its member countries. Fon Plata is a development bank from 5 countries in South America: Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. It was founded in 1974, but in the last decade, it had some sort of a rebirth. All of its member countries are part of one of the most important integration efforts in our side of the world, called Mercosur. Fon Plata has been one of the financial instruments to achieve this goal, especially in the last 10 years. We were able to obtain our credit rating and increase by 6 times our capacity to finance and support public investment initiatives. The main focus of our vision is integration, not only in commercial terms, but also in terms of development agendas. Our region has experienced significant economic growth, but we can ignore the fact that there's still a lot to be done, especially regarding the asymmetry amongst countries in South America. Firstly, it can help to increase trade and investment between countries, which in turn can lead to economic growth and job creation. Secondly, integration can help to reduce poverty and inequality by promoting social and economic development across the region. And finally, it can help strengthen political ties between countries and promote stability in the region. To achieve these goals, it is important that development banks play a key role in supporting regional integration initiatives. Development banks have a unique role to play in providing financing and infrastructure projects that can help to connect countries and promote trade and investment. They can also provide technical assistance and capacity building support to help countries implement regional integration policies and programs. Of course, there are challenges that need to be addressed in order to promote regional integration and strengthen what you have called our competitive advantages. These include issues related to political will and regulatory frameworks. However, I believe that with the right approach and political commitment from all stakeholders, we can build a more integrated and prosperous Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you're running something that's very interesting for this part of the world, in so much as there's an obvious analogy here between Central Asia and Mercosur, in so much as you have the same 5 countries, you have very disparate economies within that, between Bolivia and Brazil. And I think the regional integration thing is obvious. I mean, the economic concept of comparative advantage. By clubbing together, it means that the difference in the sizes and development of those countries, everyone wins from it, because you can specialize, you get the support, you have the economic boost from the other countries. I was wondering if you had any concrete advice. I mean, having done this, you spend your whole time boosting economic connectivity within your countries. I mean, what are the key takeaways? Are there some universal truths you found that apply across the board that could be taken for Central Asia as a ruler to help them with that development?
Probably I would like to refer something that here our representative from the NDB established. Fon Plata, as the NDB, doesn't have an own agenda. we respect the national agendas of our member countries. So actually what Fomplata does is actually help in those aspects that our countries need. I mean, the needs in Brazil are completely different from the needs in Bolivia or in Uruguay, so we are very respectful from those agendas and political points of view. And probably a methodology that's been very useful for Fomplata is the fact that we work as a cooperative, in the sense that in our governance, each of our member countries has one vote, despite their capital participation in the vote, in the bank. So Brazil and Uruguay or Paraguay have the same weight in our decision-making strategy. So I think that that's a very important message also. So you can think that probably some development banks can work as a cooperative and not as a shareholder or a commercial bank form or strategy.
And to what extent, Mercosur, I mean, it's the grouping, but to what extent does that exist as an organization in order to coordinate them all? Because again, here in Central Asia, we have all the stands, but there's no sort of, Central Asian group or BRICS equivalent or whatever you want to call it. I mean, does that play a role, that you actually institutionalize this cooperation somehow? I mean, the obvious example to look at is the EU, which has now a huge infrastructure and very coordinated, and as a regional integration project, which is what it was, hugely successful, but it's grown into this political thing. And are you sort of halfway along that road?
Plata is only an actor and a financial instrument to make this dream come true. Mercosur so far, exactly, is not only a commercial agreement between our countries, but also it has a political perspective and a political view. We're even thinking about a common
common currency.
Common currency, exactly. So maybe...
Is that going to happen?
Well, Fomplata is doing everything to work that.
You want it to happen. It makes sense.
To make it happen, exactly.
Indeed. Fascinating stuff, Mariana. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to our last speaker, the host, one of the hosts of this, Nikolai Bukuzov, who's the chairman of the Eurasia Development Bank. Nikolai, you have a presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, colleagues and speakers at the panel. Thank you very much, dear guests. And thank you very much, ADFIAP, because, we are here talking about global challenges and global problems which are common for the whole world. We represent here different continents: Africa, Latin America, Asia, Eurasia. So we all cover the most population of the world, the most territory of the world, and actually we are from many countries. Our institutions are different in size, small, big, but we all united with a necessity to solve and help to solve global problems and global challenges. And all these challenges being solved or improved will help to make people lives better, to improve standard of lives, to make air cleaner, the environment better. So this is all about our organization ADFIAP, which helps to unite all these organizations to create atmosphere, to exchange experience, and this is important. As for Eurasian Development Bank, we are focused on Eurasian region. There are 6 countries in our bank, and we are focused mainly on Eurasia and Central Asia. That is why I would like to emphasize and focus on Central Asian challenges. The EDB is a classical development institute with classic missions and classic instruments, from technical assistance to project development. We are mainly focused on project financing rather than sovereign financing, and we consider ourselves and we put ourselves as an experts in the region. Actually, what are challenges of the Central Asia? First of all, I would emphasize the necessity to improve connectivity. The lack of access to the sea restricts the trading and economic potential for the Central Asia, and due to high transport costs, GDPs landlocked countries on average their capacity is 20% lower than it could be. What should be done to address these challenges? First of all, it is expanding transport infrastructure in all directions, which means that we need to improve critical infrastructure, Caspian ports, airport, transport and logistics centers, border crossing points, and this is all very important. The second challenge I would mention water and energy. The region has one of the lowest levels of water and use efficiency in the world. The average water use efficiency in the region is estimated at 2.5 $2.5 per cubic meters versus $19 per cubic meter in the world. And the rapid population growth, urbanization, the development of agriculture and industry, all these developments demand more water. The position of our bank is that Central Asia should employ a collective approach to managing water in the region. And that is our goal to improve. Another challenge is resource dependence. Despite substantial progress in social and economic development, some factors constrain economic development and income growth in Central Asia, and the resource development is a big one. Economic growth in Central Asia countries still depends on export of commodities and labor. Mineral products account for more than 50% of all goods exported from the region, and that is why we need to invest into setting up new manufacturing plants to reduce dependence on commodities for the whole region. Definitely the huge challenge is climate change. Central Asian countries are among the most vulnerable in the world to risk and threats of climate change. Water stress is high and expected to increase 2.8 times in some regions of Central Asia, but by 2040. The region is expected to experience a great increase in temperature compared to global average. This could lead to accelerated melting of glaciers, reduced snow cover, intensifying desertification and degradation and salinization of land, loss of biodiversity and increase deforestation. So these are main challenges, and the strategy of Eurasian Development Bank is addressed to overcome these challenges. We expect to invest $10.9 billion into the region until 2026, with particular focus to Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia. We have a number of projects to develop in these countries. We have special digital fund who is set to develop a digital infrastructure of this in these countries, and we have very big focus on digital advisory to our country members. All these challenges will help the Central Asian region to develop even faster. Central Asia average growth since 2000 amounts 6.3%, which is higher than, for example, for emerging markets, which is 5.3%, and higher than 2.6% for global growth. And being solved these challenges, I think, make Central Asia is one of the fastest developing region in the world. In the end, I would like to mention a few projects which will probably help to overcome some challenges. For example, we are now trying to build and to help to build hydropower plant in Kyrgyzstan, Kambarata 2. This is the hydro plant which will work for all countries of Central Asia: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan. It is very important to build it for all countries, and this is mainly touches cross-border PPP problems, and this is extremely important. Another project is Ayagos-Bakhti railroad with respective control points, and this is also the project will help to unlock the transition potential for Kazakhstan, for example. And definitely we are focused on projects in Almaty. We are trying to renovate energy system in Almaty, and renovation of old coal-fueled energy plants in Almaty is our primary goal, as ecological situation as Almaty is not very sound, and probably solving this project will help to make the city Almaty even more beautiful. This is in brief my message on Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Nikolai, we're sitting here in a family of development banks, but from that family, you know, you're the local, in so much as, you know, you live and work here. Which puts you slightly, well, the focus on you is slightly different in so much as, you know, the other development banks here are, to a larger or lesser extent, involved in Central Asia. But what do you bring to the party? I mean, because you're going to cooperate with all these people, I mean, co-financing, but you have a very much more hands-on, pragmatic approach, no?
Yeah, you're right, Ben. Actually, I mentioned a few projects, but even this project amounts to cumulative investments of around $10 billion, which is hard to be for not that big bank like Eurasian Development Bank. We can do partially these investments, and we are interested to cooperate with bigger institutions, which we have common shareholders for most of them, and it's very important to cooperate. We can bring our expertise, we sit on the land, we know the project, we know details. Probably it's easy to cooperate with us to solve global problems. But it's also very important to share experience, to share approaches, and even being a bit far from Latin America or Africa, I think we are not that far, because we can structure projects which are mutually beneficial for our continents, for our countries, for our shareholders. And this is our mission, this is our goal, to solve together global problems.
Indeed, I mean, there's a globalization going on in so much as, you the new development bank is an example of that, where leading emerging markets and increasingly more and more members of that are joining together to share experience, to share capital, and also the interconnectivity. I mean, the investment that's going in now to Central Asia is taking off. Like I say, I've been following the region a long time. It seems to me we've reached some sort of critical mass where we're moving into the next phase. I mean, are you seeing that too? Regional integration, we've been talking about transport, connectivity, but the level of investment is going up as well. I mean, what's your experience there? Your EDB itself has been increasing its investment quickly, is it not?
Yeah, you are right. Actually, for example, last year we invested into the projects in Kazakhstan of around $1.5 billion, which is absolutely high for our bank in this country, but we also invest record high amounts in Armenia, for example. This year, Kyrgyzstan in our focus, as we are doing we investing into a number of hydro plants in Kyrgyzstan. But again, all these projects, it's impossible to bring to the highest efficient level once countries not cooperate to each other, as it's only mutual cooperation will bring the level of investments, the effectiveness of investors to the highest level. And I mentioned that Central Asia develops with average pace of 6.3% since 2000, and solving water and energy problem will add another 1.5% to this growth rate. If we unlock transition potential for Eurasian level, it will add another 20% to GDP growth. So it is doable to achieve even higher GDP growth rate, and all these result in better living standards, better environment, better place to live, finally. And this is our mission.
How would you characterize the regional integration? Because again, talking to our other panelists, I mean, each region has different levels, it seems. They've reached different development levels in terms of cooperation. And it seems to me that, until recently, Central Asia was marked by rivalries between the countries, but there seems to be a new mood now of interregional cooperation. They're talking about a Silk Road Schengen visa, that kind of thing. And EDB itself, I mean, you're open to new members. For example, do you think Uzbekistan I think it's on the docket to join EDB this year, is that not right?
Yeah, we are in talks with Uzbekistan discussing their potential entering the bank, and the level of cooperation between countries should be increased. And as we discussed yesterday with my colleague from African Cooperation, it's very important the role of the leader, who puts the agenda on the top, who unites countries with interesting projects which will be mutually beneficial, who brings the approach, who explain how to do it. Because everybody talks about joint problems, but the approach to execute the problem, this is probably crucial. And probably this is why why development institutions, they should bring the solution and probably bring countries to help you to execute this solution.
Can I throw that point open to the whole panel? Because, we talked about possibilities of cooperation, practical things that you can do, like, organizations like Mercosur, which facilitate these cooperations. But surely that's the way to go, isn't it? Is successful projects, that everybody's going to look at a successful project and say, we want more of the same. And isn't that what you guys, your experience? I mean, I forget who it was, Ashok, I think you were saying that you had some successful projects that people were looking at. Anyone to comment? I mean, do you think that that's a particularly useful way of doing it?
Yes, thanks for that. So if you recall, I mentioned that our first projects were a wind farm in Cape Verde, and we've done a hydro dam, another wind farm in Djibouti. And as we think about the energy requirements in Africa, we have over half the population without access to electricity. In fact, 75% of the people without access to electricity globally are in Africa. And if we also look at the area of clean cooking, that's also another large number. And you'll be surprised at the number of deaths associated with lack of clean cooking. So we've been thinking about what can we do to improve energy access in Africa. Bearing in mind the fact that Africa has 60% of the best solar sources, but less than 1% has been developed. So what we did was to acquire the largest renewable energy company in Africa. And we acquired that and we merged it with our own renewable energy assets. So right now we have about 1.4 gigawatts of renewable energy, and we have a pipeline of 3 gigawatts. And we think that with a pipeline like that, we can engage more and do more to improve energy access. I give this example because it's important to not just start the project, but think about how you can scale it. Bearing in mind the opportunity scale and the challenge that we face. Energy access is so important because you can't industrialize without energy, and because we have such vast growing population. If you look at the demographics, I think for both Africa and Central Asia, it's about the same. About 60% less than 30 years old. So you need to create jobs, and energy access is important for creating jobs. So we need to find ways of enhancing the scale of the projects that we have embarked on, and see how we can do more.
Are you saying then projects that directly impact populations, where the population itself can directly see the results, are more attractive, or at least important to do? Because, I mean, if you set up a bunch of wind farms, then the electricity that comes out of the plug is just electricity as far as the population is concerned. Whereas something what you're talking about directly impacts people's lives, and therefore, it helps the sustainability, it helps the agenda. Is that right?
Exactly, because, I mentioned clean cooking as well, because people can easily, relate to that. And I talk about access of electricity for job creation as well. So people can see how they benefit from that process. And I also mentioned the importance of local content. You have to have a program to ensure that the local community is part of the process and they are getting direct benefit from the economic activity that is taking place.
Suzanne, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I would just actually echo again some of those things on there. It's really, really important that, with young populations, that they are provided with the opportunities. And we know that those are some of the local challenges. But when you have, from what I'm saying also, is that you have a skill base, and particularly in Central Asia, where people have left, gained many skills, education, they're coming back. And it's about actually deploying that know-how and those skills in projects which can be replicable. I think that's the key in many of these things. Is it's not only local content. Yes, you absolutely need to demonstrate there are local benefits, because otherwise, whether it's perceived or not, they do need that opportunity. But then you also need to provide local opportunities, create those investments, and also I think that there's a whole broad range of approaches that we need to look at, incubators all the way up the value chain that you're looking at for the different types of deals. Create incubators which create ideas. We have an ADB Ventures program, which is actually a climate and clean tech incubator for small deals, with the hope that many of the ideas could then be replicated and used throughout the region and other countries. So, there's a number of aspects there I think is really important. And one, finding replicable deals, finding the right structures, finding new instruments. I think what we're all looking for is our value add. How can we provide value added service to the clients that are here and to the people on the ground? I think that's one of the main drivers that is, our part of our mandate as well.
So just to keep this concrete, looking from your experience to Central Asia, what would be the kinds of projects that would meet those kind of criteria? What do you recommend would be good investments to do.
So, one of the projects that was just mentioned was the Almaty power project, the CHP project, and with you replacing coal with gas to provide clean energy. So ADB is one of the main funders for that as well, where we're looking to close that deal soon. And through that tangible project, yesterday I had the opportunity to go up into the mountains, and I was told that before, at one point, when the pollution is bad, you can't see down into the city. So when you have concrete actions like that, which you're taking pollution out of the air, you're taking particulates out of the air, which can have a direct and positive impact, not only about the efficiency of how the company is run, but the people on the ground, that they will, have a better, healthy environment. So there's all kinds of different things that we're looking at. And I can use examples in healthcare. I had the benefit of, we funded a nephrology, kidney project, dialysis, thank you. And it's a project that that has such huge impact on the population. So you make those kinds of investments, in key areas, in key sectors where you can actually see, big impact for them, positive impact to the people on the ground, because in the end, that's why we're here.
Indeed. I think it's becoming more and more visible. I mean, I was in Tashkent recently talking to the people, and they've said life is transformed out of all recognition in the last few years, and talking to the businesses there, the same thing is that the opportunities opening up, the interconnectivity thing is extremely important, in so much as I was in the Kizilkum Desert talking to a vacuum cleaner factory, and they've just made an export deal with Tanzania. And this is a kind of business we haven't seen before, or talking to Ukrainian farmers, and they're now buying cane fields in Ghana because to source the sugar directly. And this interconnectivity, this trade is key. And at a time post-COVID where we're talking about deglobalization, going backwards, that in order to maintain those routes, those trade routes, those inter-investment between different countries is crucial. And the other takeout I've taken from this, and I think is a key plus for the development banks, is we talk about climate change and the Paris Accords and the limits the governments are trying to put on with, I don't know, in Europe where, I used to drive a diesel car, they've just been banned. However, the investments that are necessary for green energy, these are long-term investments, 30 years. And it's really the development banks, private funds will invest, pension funds in particular, are interested in that kind of long-term development, but they're not really instigators of those kind of projects. And the development banks here play a key role, and at a large level too, where we're talking about changing pollution levels so noticeably in the air in somewhere like Almaty because of that kind of investment. So the development banks are leading on that, and then the private funds can come in and join in it for those with long-term profiles. Another key part of what the development banks are doing. And here in Central Asia, I think we're at a very interesting time where someone like EDB is going to play a crucial role in terms of lifting the country, the region as a whole, to another level, increasing that interconnectivity, pushing the green agenda, and so on. So I think we've come to the end of the session. I'd like to thank our very distinguished panel for an extremely interesting discussion. Thank you again for everyone for attending. And also, please stay on the stage because apparently we're doing a photo straight away. And to the audience, I hope you found that interesting. I thought it was a fascinating discussion. Thank you all for coming, and I'm sure conversations between you also will foster this family that we've built of development banks in order to push our agendas across the globe and specifically here in Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you very much for our moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear guests, participants, and our honorable speakers. Our first panel session is now finished. Before we go for lunch break, may we please invite you all for a traditional, memorable photo session with all the guests, with all the speakers on our stage. Уважаемые дамы и господа, перед тем, как мы отправимся на обеденный перерыв, позвольте пригласить вас всех принять участие в памятной традиционной...
Dear guests and participants, please, you are kindly invited to the floor to have a common family picture. Let us make a picture for our speakers in the center, and also you can take all these steps.
Make a historical, memorable photo session with our speakers. We would like to ask our moderator and speakers to be in the center of the photo, and all the guests, please come closer. Our dear speakers, please keep standing on our stage. Dear guests, all the participants, please proceed to the stage and let's make a photo with our speakers, moderator, right now. And after that, we will go to lunch break. Дорогие друзья, уважаемые гости, пожалуйста, не стесняйтесь.
Dear friends, dear guests, please come to the stage, take a place near the speakers. You are all kindly invited.
A bit closer to our speakers. Let's make it all together. Убедительная просьба, дорогие друзья, чуть-чуть ближе, чуть-чуть компактнее давайте расположимся, так, чтобы поместились все. Можно сделать немного в полоборота. Dear guests, please a bit closer to each other. Our distinguished guests, all your attention here, please, to the center, to our main photographer.